How nursing home go?
Okay.
We had 11.
We had 11, we had 12, and then we're 11.
There's a certain church that want to prove that a certain preacher went to Rome. Anybody want to guess what that? Who is the apostle that went to Rome? A certain church.
You button on?
Now.
Thank you.
Yes. Who's the preacher? Say it out loud.
You said which apostle?
Yeah, apostle. Peter. So who would be the church? What would be the church? What church preaches that?
Catholics, probably.
Pardon?
Probably the Catholics.
The Catholic Church. Has anybody ever heard that? Well, it makes sense that they would do that. Where did Peter go? What does the Bible say? Where did he go? I don't have the chapter and verse. I don't have the book in my... This is what we would be taught early on. So I could bring up something. I wasn't going to bring it up, but I thought I'd bring it up anyway. And I didn't check it out ahead of time because it's been so long since I've gone over this stuff. And we were taught this stuff really early on. Where did Peter go? Does anybody remember what the Bible says Peter went where? Anybody know? He went to Babylon. Peter went to Babylon. Now that should be a verse. Should I go up there and check it out? Should I? He goes to Babylon. And so then there's those that say, well, that Rome is likened unto Babylon. And that's how they I guess I'm bad. I'm just sorting things out in my own head. I've taught you this stuff. It's just if you just don't remember. That's all. Babylon.
It's in New York.
Oh, yeah, 1 Peter 5:13. It said, in here, what it says, the Chew that is at Babylon, but there's a crease in the page. So when I take the page of this concordance, I pull it, and it says church. I thought I was a little nervous there. The church that is at Babylon. What does that say? What is 5:13? What does that say?
You're right. The church that is at Babylon elected together with you, salute you, and so doth Marcus, my son.
All right, so but is that what it says that Peter went there?
No, it says the church salutes you. So they're making an assumption that Peter is in charge there.
Peter is there.
They're making-
Oh, that, okay, yeah, well, without reading it and looking at it, and you have it in front of you, the assumption is that Peter's there.
Right, yeah.
Okay, at Babylon. So then they want to say that Rome is Babylon. All right. So if we go to Romans 15, go to Romans 15, and give you another proof text that Peter never went there. Give you a proof text. Romans 15, give you a proof text that Peter never went there. We've been over this. When we do survey and all, we do go over this. It's just that it's kind of like anything else, man. I sit there and my banjo teacher said, I can play those Beverly Hillbillies, Ballad of Jed Clampett. I can play what's called the easy version. I can rattle it off. But he said, well, no, he didn't want me in Scruggs' book. So if you turn to the Scruggs book, man, it is difficult, man. And you got to go over it and over it and over to get the finger. I don't know how these guys do it, how they develop that. I mean, it just happened. I mean, somebody didn't teach them. They just did it. How do they do it? I don't know. It must be. They're just sitting there watching the corn grow and playing, you know.
Started at 5 years old.
Could be. 15, verse 20. So I brought that up is because it's only by a lot of repetition. Now listen, now certain things my father told me that I never forgot. He only had to tell me once. He only told me once. But I noticed that others I have to tell over and over. How do you measure a drill with a micrometer? Do you measure it at the shank or at the bit? No, you measure it at the bit. You measure it up top at the bit. Pardon?
I guessed wrong.
You guessed wrong. You measure it up at the bit. That's where you measure.
Make sure it don't get too big, right?
Well, that's where you actually do it with a mic. Oh, I mean, certain things with... Yeah, where the work is being done. And a lot of machining things, you know, he just said it once to me. I don't know, I just never forgot it. But repetition, usually it's repetition, like you said, 8 hours a day, repetition. Now look at verse 20. Yea, so I have strived to preach the gospel, not where Christ was named, lest I should build upon another man's foundation. So Paul wants to go to Rome. This is a proof text that he wouldn't go to Rome if he was building on another man's foundation. That is a proof text that it was, since Peter had gone there, he was then building upon another man's foundation. Does that make sense? That's what we're taught. Go to Romans 1. Now, I don't mean to throw a wrench in the gearbox.
You already did.
I already did. But if we go to Romans, I bring this up, and then I think I could have gone to a couple commentaries that would talk about this and get their take on it. Well, then, we're going to begin at verse 8. Romans 1, verse 8. That's where we're going to begin. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. Well, he's writing the letter to Rome, to the Romans. Well, then, who won those people? Or are they travelers? Did they get saved elsewhere and travel there? Yeah, you see where I can't reconcile it? Does everybody see that? That there's a wrench in the works? It won't have anything to do with the sermon, but I just thought I'd throw that out. It's a question in my own mind. So, I don't know, maybe your commentary says something back there about it.
It does.
It does?
It does.
What does it, tell me what it says. Because I know what we've been taught 30 years ago.
Okay, 1 Peter 5:13, comment. The church that is at Babylon may be a cryptic or symbolic name for Rome.
There we go.
Revelation 17, the whore of Babylon.
All right. Well, yeah,
Or Peter
we
may have
could-
actually been in Babylon, which had a large Jewish population. Marcus, my son, probably refers to John Mark, whom Paul had disqualified, but whom he later forgave.
Okay, so that guy then is a traditionalist. That's what is traditionally taught. Okay? I gave you the traditional teaching. Yeah. But, now what's Jerusalem called?
Sodom and Egypt.
Yes, you're right. That's called Sodom and Egypt. You're right. And where do you find that? What book? I won't nail you down, chapter.
Revelation.
Revelation, yeah, you're right. But I would go to Revelation 17. That's what they did. They went there. But you mentioned Romans 5 something?
I mentioned Rome.
Oh, you just mentioned Rome. I thought you gave a check.
Well, there's also, then he goes, he's explaining a little bit more about John Mark, how
Oh,
he
okay.
forgave and whatever.
Well, we were always taught that, no, it's Babylon. It's not in type. Or cryptic. You said cryptic.
It could be cryptic.
And he says it could be.
It may be cryptic
It
or
may be
symbolic
cryptic.
for Rome.
All right.
Or Peter may have actually been there.
Or Peter may have been actually, but I have an open-ended question in case anybody wanted to question it.
Yeah.
That there's already saved people there. Now, how do these people get there? Because he's not building on another man's foundation. So how did those people get there if some other man wasn't there, or were they one elsewhere? And
His answer is definite maybe.
Definite maybe. Yeah, the answer to the question is definite maybe. I might read up on it and bring you another answer.
He had breakfast at the Waffle House.
Okay. All right. At the waffle. All right. All right. So now listen, we have 11 points. Let's do them. And there'll be something here for everybody. There should be something here for everybody. I wanted to have a flow of this. There's a flow to this as to the beginning, how it begins and how it ends. And hopefully we'll see the flow to this. In other words, it's kind of like a building project or any kind of a plan that you make. You begin with this plan. I told you this morning, when I make a plan, an engineering plan, I always draw a picture. I make a sketch. And the kids don't like this. My kids, I said, get me a pad and a pencil. Or get me a pad. They want to skip the pad and the pen. It's immediately desired for skipping. Let's skip that point. If I make a sign, now today they do it on a tablet or on a computer. They do it some other ways. If I make a sign, I take my pad and I draw out E's. The letter E, the size is to make sure it fits on the page. Otherwise, if it doesn't fit on the page, you ever see the monkey thing? The monkey, he makes plan ahead. It's on this side, but by the time you're at the end, the letters get real small, So you make this plan ahead of time, and once you have the sketch, then you figure out the tools that you need, so you gather up all the tools, and then you say, well, I can't do this, or how am I going to do this, how am I going to do that? And you make a plan to be able to perform that task. As you're building, in my situation is building. If you're a woman, you're sewing something, or you're cooking something, and you have this plan, you get all your ingredients together. The worst thing to do is if the wife is short ingredients. A preacher did bring this up. He was, I don't have enough sugar. So he went out and got the sugar. He came back. And then she read further on, well, I don't have the flour. It was actually Pastor Folger. Yeah, I don't have the flour. So he went and got the flour, and he came back. And then also, I think there was a third thing. He said, all right, now let's look at the whole list. Let's get the list, because I'm not going out again, So we make this plan ahead of time so we avoid, not to say it's always avoided, but the idea is that you want to avoid those things. So the plan is made ahead of time. All right, so we have these 11 points. We're going to begin at verse 8. It begins with the first. In our title tonight, I entitled this First and Last, how it begins and how it ends. And our first point, we have all P words because that's the easiest letter to use. First, I thank my God through Jesus Christ for you all, that your faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. So when a person has their faith spoken of through the whole world, and Paul is hearing about it either through a letter, through other brethren that are traveling. And by the way, Paul's lifestyle is different than your lifestyle and my lifestyle. You and I are not traveling people. Paul's a traveling person. He's single. We assume he's single. He's receiving letters. He's in the forefront of all of this. So he's in a different kind of lifestyle than you and I. Not to say that we can't experience some of this. Brother Wiltsey used to be a truck driver. So that's the lifestyle of traveling all over the country. There's this country western song, I've been everywhere, man, I've been everywhere. Have you been in all 50 states?
No.
You have not. There's two states I have not been in. What haven't you been in? Or
Hawaii and Alaska.
I'll increase that. 4 states, I'm sorry. 4 states I have not been to. Yeah, and that includes Hawaii and Alaska. I have not been to Washington or Oregon, but I've been to all the others. And all the states basically look the same. And sometimes you go through the state and you don't even stop, If you're at the one corner in Wyoming, you're just driving through, and you just drive through the corner. If there's the 4 corners, you can stand at the pin, and you're in all 4 states at the same time, and so on, and things like that. But our first P word, which we will, and you can apply this to each and every one in our personal life, and that is the proof. The proof that you are saved is not necessarily by your testimony with your own mouth or your own actions, but the testimony of someone else about you. So, aren't people very truthful? You know? People tend to be very truthful about you outside of the realm wherever you are. What do we call that when they're very truthful about you?
Parents.
Parents, I call it gossip. You know, people, if they're going to gossip, they may as well gossip and point to the house and say, well, that's where the religious nuts are. That's where those people that put the signs out and have a bumper sticker. All right, so there is proof, and the proof in the pudding is that someone else is, it's not that you're walking down the street with a sign or passing out tract, but what other people are saying about you. And Paul is receiving this information from wherever he's receiving this information, but he lays this first groundwork that the faith is spoken of throughout the whole world. And whatever the realm of that world was at that time, it's not the world as you and I know it, you know, throughout the entire globe, but in that realm of the known world of where people travel and information of the ancient world that people travel. Begins with the proof. There's proof. All right, and it goes from verse 9 with the proof, and we can apply that to our own life. If there's anything that we could just stop there with one point. If you want to have a good witness or a good testimony, the best way to have it is have someone else saying it. Not just you saying, not to say that you shouldn't be saying it. That's what gives the person that says it about you the proof, is that you have other people saying it about you. That you are that's the religious house, all right? We had a neighbor boy that there were two neighbor boys lived in that house. The one we were very familiar with. I mean, he used four-letter words. They lived at the racetrack, folks. They lived at the stables. The kid would take the horse and grab the horse by the tongue. Would you reach your hand in a horse's mouth? I wouldn't. Reach his hand in a horse's mouth, pull the tongue out. He'd stick his hand in there and to show he was very familiar with a horse. It would not get bit, and he knew where you would get bit and where you would not get bit. You could put your hand in the back of a horse. I think there's no teeth in the back. I forget it. He would explain this. He was bold and forward. He had another brother. And there was a need one time for that brother. And that brother, he came to our house, and it was like he came to our house. He didn't want anybody to know he came to our house. So where did he come? Not only the back door, but which back door? No, our garage is detached. No, he came not to the basement, not to the back door. He came around where no one could see. He came to that porch door where no one would go. That's where he knocked. Because in the back of his head, I forget what the need was. In the back of his head, that was the place to go. I'll go there, but I don't want anybody to see that I went there. And he snuck around to that back door to knock on the door to get our attention to come. You want to have someone else display the proof that you are indeed saved or that you know Jesus. That's the crazy house. That's the people that talk about Jesus. If it's other Christians talking about you, of you, a Christian, you want the testimony or whatever they're saying to be positive. If it's the lost world saying that's where the nut house is, well, that's fine. You know, if that's what they're doing. But there's got to be the proof. There's got to be proof. And Paul expresses that there is this proof. First, I think, my God. All right, verse 9. If we have this plan that we're going to have, and I used an engineering example, and I make this sketch, this is what we not only want this project to function, we want it to be aesthetically pleasing. You know, if you look at old machinery, did they make it ornate? Old machinery. They put art into it. They just didn't slap it together. They put art into it.
Sewing machine.
Like a sewing machine, that's a good example. Not only did they letter it, but it was fancy letter, you know, with serifs and all. And you know, they put an effort into this thing. And it wasn't just the final product. We're talking about something that is on paper. I'm talking about on paper. Something that today, and I wouldn't say that they didn't want to skip it back then. They're probably just the same as we are today. There are people that just want to skip that part. They just want to get to the building of this thing. But here, what is very important in the building of a relationship or in the performance of a project for a Christian, and this is probably lacking, and that's our second point, and that is the prayer. The prayer. I don't want to turn that one, Joe, move that bottom dial up a little bit. I turned this one off already. It says in verse 9, "For God is my witness, whom I serve with my spirit in the gospel of his Son, that without ceasing I make mention of you always in my prayers." So the idea is that this preparation, or what's going to be taking place, I mean, it's like getting the tools ready and getting this idea all ready to go. And this is before any of the work has really begun. The foundation of this is really laid with prayer. And we tend to negate, is that a word? Negate, neglect, skip. Let's skip that part. We tend to skip that part. Let's just get the gas in the car and let's get out of here. They tend to skip that part and they want to just get to it where Paul is laying a foundation here that's really going to be the foundation that's really going to support all this. And that is prayer, the prayer. We don't and should not neglect, lessen, make it less value, something that is in the end of great value, which will in the end either makes or breaks the project. And not to say the project could not have survived without prayer, but how can it hurt with prayer? And so we need to do what Paul does, is he expresses right from the get-go, and he does this in his letters, at the beginning of his letters and at the end of his letters. He expresses the prayers that he says on behalf of the people. On behalf of the people. Verse 10. Now, you're going to see these P words tend to kind of, I would say out of 11, maybe half a dozen of them or 5 will pop out. And verse 10, "Make your request, if by any means now at length I might have" what? "A prosperous journey by the will of God to come unto you." So don't you want to be prosperous today, prosperous tomorrow? I mean, who wants to fail? I mean, who wants to just go out and I just hope this whole thing's destroyed. You purpose in your mind, you want to be prosperous ahead of time. I mean, the goal is to be a wealth of spirituality, to be prosperous on his journey. And he also does say in this journey that he's making, if it be the will of God. A prosperous journey by the will of God to come up to you. If it gets stopped, remember Paul and Silas ventured to go here, ventured to go there, and the Spirit stopped them, and then there was a man that came in a vision, come over to Macedonia and help us, and then the will of God opened up there. So whether it was the will or not for him to go to Rome, he's already laying the groundwork. He had a desire to go. He knows that they're saved people there, and his desire was to come to them. We'll see why he desired to go there, and he lays the groundwork ahead of time that already praying about you, praying for you, and praying that I will have a prosperous journey, if it's God's will, that this will open up. So how can you apply these points to your life now? And that is, you want people, whether they're lost or saved, and whether it's good things or bad things, if it's other Christians, you want them to say good things. If it's lost people, what difference does it make if it's bad or good? That still there's a testimony or proof that you're saved. And so you don't want to be, secret agent man. You don't want to be a secret agent man in the Lord. You want people to know that you are saved. The proof of this, the prayer is very important to lay this foundation of prayer. And when you venture out, you want to be prosperous, very, very, very prosperous in your journey. Listen, my mother is. She's been saying, today she kind of lost it. And I think it was really real. She's coming home from New York. Now, we used to drive to New York. We only went on vacation New York. But we had relatives in Rochester, New York. She thinks her mother is going to come home soon from work. She mentioned that. Well, my grandmother died in 1964. And so my mother was kind of like the matron of the house, taking care of all the kids, while my grandmother was working. And so she'd be watching the kids. So she wants to don't eat that. Put it away right away. We got to get on the road. She wanted to get on the road to get home from New York right away. And and all of a sudden I figured it out. Well, I know why she wants to get home. She thinks she's in Rochester. She said, we got to get home to Cleveland before it's dark. I said, Mom, we're already in Cleveland. And then it's Eileen and Arnie and Eileen. And I said, well, Mom, they're dead already. Trying to communicate that they've been, not only are they dead, they've been dead a long time. But that wasn't going to sink in. But we want to be prosperous with my mother. We want this end of her life to be prosperous. Somehow, some way. I mean, so far it's been pretty good until the last 2 hours. Until that. And then she got a little, shall we say, feisty? Prospering. So we want this to be prospering. Look at verse 11. There's something wrong with the Christians that are at Rome. So he writes verse 11. For I long to see you. So he has this burden. We could have had that. I long to see. I could have put the burden. He has this burden. To see you, that I may impart unto you some spiritual gift, to the end you may be established. So the perfecting is our next P word. His desire is to perfect the Christians. Folks, we preach this morning. The time is running out, folks. We got to understand that God's clock is running down. And all the time you ever got, it's not like money, like you're storing it up in a bank. You were given all the time you ever are going to get when you were born. And we're making withdrawals on that every day out of that bank. And the time that we're allotted is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And so we preach on this so that the saints will be perfected, that you want to grow in grace and in the knowledge of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. The perfecting of the saints. Now, I'm glad you read that thing out of that commentary, is the fact that, you know what the answer is? The ultimate answer, if we go that route, is we don't know. You had breakfast at the Waffle House. That there's no clear-cut answer. Is there an answer? Yes. It may not be revealed in the Bible. In the end, it doesn't. What difference does it make? There's got to be some major doctrinal thing missing from these people that they need for the perfecting of the saints. The perfecting. Look at verse 12. That is, that I may be comforted together with you by the mutual faith, both of you and me. So if we add this thing that is missing, when he comes there, they'll have this thing that they need so that there can be peace when they fellowship. The peace, this mutual comfort when they sit down together and eat and have the Lord's Supper together and just hobnob about the Lord, that there is this mutual understanding and feeling one for another. I would assume that this perfecting that is to take place, because I assume these were younger Christians. When I say younger, I don't mean in age, I mean in age spiritually. That when they mature up and they have this thing that is missing, that needs to be added to their faith, that there can be peace in their life and in their fellowship. Verse 13. Now I would not have you ignorant, brethren, that oftentimes, here's our next word, P word, I purposed to come unto you, but was let, meaning I was stopped hitherto, that I might have some fruit among you also, even as among other Gentiles. Now apparently these are Gentiles too here, and so there is a purpose. He has this. When you start a building project, whatever it is, hey, Starla stayed home and made a cake. So she had a purpose. And she was a day late and a nickel short on something. And she remembered what Doreen told her about a recipe or how to make this or that. And Doreen said, wow, you remembered that. So I think she was short frosting. Anyway, she rustled it up and made it. But she purposed to make the cake. There's a purpose in your life. Folks, if your purpose is anything other than when you venture out for Jesus Christ, that you're on an adventure, you're on the wrong purpose. You're on the wrong purpose. The opportunities that you and I have each and every day, some of us have greater opportunities than others. Some have greater opportunities than others. You say, well, the only opportunity that I have is I'm going to see this guy tomorrow. I'm not going to see this guy tomorrow, but that's the only opportunity I have. Well, then take advantage of it. Well, it's only one person. Well, take advantage of it. If there's only one person in your life there, well, take advantage of it. And have this purpose for perfecting. If it's your wife, well, I liken the wife as to, let's say, a flower. Well, what would you do? You give it to a deer and let the deer eat it? You know, yummy. What are you going to do? Are you going to put it in water? Or would you put it in a vase without water? Right? You can figure all that stuff out on your own. Are you going to display it so it can be seen? What function does it do in the middle of the table? What function does the flour do in the middle of the table? Does it make the food taste better? Does it help you in cleaning up the table? But no, it was pleasant looking at it. Right? A purpose. Paul has his purpose. He has his proof. He's laying a foundation of prayer. He wants to be prosperous on this journey. And he knows that they're missing something, so they want to perfect that in a person. And if there's flaws in other people, well, help them out and perfect them. Help them out in the perfecting. So that, and once that perfecting is done, what was Paul going to expect? That they would be comforted in this mutual faith, that they can just sit there together and just hobnob together. And he has this purpose to come unto them. Verse 15, and apparently, I have it 2 points from now. The way he presents this, it's almost like he says, there's not only saved people there, there's lost people there that he's addressing. It seems it appears as though he's addressing both saved and lost people. The way the we's and these pronouns are being worked out here. He has this purpose. Look at verse 14. I am debtor, both to the Greeks and to the barbarians, both to the wise and to the unwise. So I'm a debtor. In other words, I have this obligation. I have this burden, this purpose to go there, and I have this obligation that I am a debtor to them to give them the gospel. So since I am a debtor, I'm indebted to you. when you owe somebody something, maybe I'm wrong in this, you owe something, you sign a pledge that I will pay this back. This is our next P word, is the pledge. I have this pledge that I need to pay this debt back. Not a debt that we owe Christ, this debt in which to witness, that these people need to hear about Jesus. So he has this pledge that he makes. He's burdened about it. You know, whether it's out of duty or desire, what difference does it make? I'm just so thrilled about going to work tomorrow, right? But you do it out of not just desire, but you do it out of duty, right? This pledge that you made. So you do it out of duty. There's nothing wrong with duty, folks. So he has this pledge to go there, debtor to the Greeks, to the barbarians, because he says there's Gentiles among them. Verse 15. So as much as in me is, I am ready to preach the gospel. The preaching. So if you're laying this plan, you make this sketch, the ultimate goal is to go and start the building. You know, the lumber arrives, the concrete goes in, the foundation is laid, and now all of a sudden, you get a crew out there, and it's not just Amish. I mean, folks, Amish people are no different than any other people. The reason they generally like the Amish is they show up.
Early.
They show up. They don't necessarily do better work. They're just as skillful and unskillful as the next guy. But they do show up. They show up and they're gonna do some work. So the idea is that the purpose, we're just not going to be praying about this. We're just not going to, and hope that we're prosperous on the way, and that we get everything ready. Everything's in its place. The perfecting is done. But we're going to get started with the preaching. Eventually the roof is going on and the shingles are going on. Right? And we hope that it's all done decently and in order. You know, the things that are supposed to go in at the right time. So the preaching is going to go on. To lost, apparently there's lost and saved are both in Rome. You got these saved people there and you got these lost people there. So the preaching is going to begin. He's going to preach the gospel to you that are at Rome. Verse 16. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. And you can pick out the next P word. For it is the power of God. So we have the power. Folks, there's a lot of power there. We think of horsepower. What is horsepower? 1 horsepower. I can't remember these engineering terms. I think it's raising. 1 horsepower is equivalent to raising, I'll just guess, 10,000 pounds, 1 foot in 1 minute.
I don't think it's that high.
Yeah, it's a particular weight, a particular distance, and a particular amount of time, and I can't remember it.
Yeah, well, but it is a known fact. It is factual. Now, if Matt was here, he might say, ha, ha, you make it go like that. Well, the guy doesn't remember. It could be 20,000 pounds. 1 foot in 1 minute.
No, I think it's 100 pounds.
No, it's more than that. I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong. But and I don't want to check it out.
This is 1 horse, though.
Oh, I know. But can you stop a 1/4 horse motor? My dad would prove this stuff to me. We'd hook up a motor. I mean, you just hook up the motor. You take the wires. If you don't have a plug, you got wires there. You just stick it in the wall, right? You hot wire this stuff up. He said, grab onto that. Grab onto the shaft. You got a 1/4 horse. Grab onto the shaft. I would hang on for dear life, man. I'll prove to you can't stop a 1/4 horse. And he plugs it in the wall, and that thing just spins right out of your hand. Now, if you had a big pulley on it, you would stop it. You would stall it. But not on the shaft, you can't. Horsepower, that is a lot of power. Folks, there's a lot of power with the gospel. All right? This isn't horsepower. This is God power. This is God power, that God came to pay, to redeem us for our sins. He paid the price. He became sin for us on the cross for your sins. You know, the hard part in salvation is getting them lost. Once they really know they're lost and they're headed for a devil's hell, then the rest is going to be easy. And that Jesus died for them on the cross, that he was buried, and he rose again 3 days later. Right? There's power to that. This isn't horsepower, this is God power. The power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first and also the Greek. Verse 17. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith. And what is it, Martin Luther? Was that his verse, Martin Luther? Or what? Wait, who was the monk that?
Martin Luther.
Well, it was Martin Luther. This is the verse that befuddled him, that he couldn't get over this verse. Is that a quote? And by the way, is it a quote out of the New Old Testament? How many times does it appear? What do I hear? I believe you're right. I think you're right. It's twice. So it's 3 times in the Bible, and if it's 4 times, I stand corrected. I'm pretty sure it's twice. I think, though, but you know what? It's twice in the Old Testament. That's what I said. But it does appear twice in the New Testament. He says it twice in the New Testament. All right, so the power, the preaching, the power, and our second last one is the plan. Is the just shall live by faith. That is the plan of God. That is, yes, sir, go ahead.
Are we talking about Micah?
Yeah, we're talking.
And the just shall live by his faith.
Yeah, that's what it says. Yes, sir. Habakkuk. Habakkuk. And it does occur also, I think it's Galatians 3:11. I'm checking it out here as we go in my center column. So it's 4 times, but I said how many times in the Old Testament? It's twice. Twice in the Old Testament, twice in the New Testament. But that is God's plan, folks. We are saved by grace, through faith. And faith cometh by hearing, and hearing how? By the Word of God. There's great power in that, in this plan. So the plans, we have a plan for this church. There's plans for our yard. There was plans for the addition. All these plans were laid out, and the plans were followed. This is the plan. This is the blueprint, folks. And you follow the plan. These guys would stall out here. They'd come running next door, and they said, blah, 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 blah. And then I'd run over here, and they would roll the print out, and they would always want to say, oh, and I said, well, what does the print say? Well, it says 10 feet. You know. I said, well, that's what it says. That's what you make. Right? There's the plans. It's on paper. If it works on paper, folks, it'll work here. If it works on paper, it'll work while you're building it. The plan. You know, there's first, what's our title? First and last. This is our last, verse 11. And this is why you and I need to be burdened about this. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. And it goes on and on to talk about that. And that is the peril. Men are going to die. And they are going to burn forever. And ever. And forevermore. The peril. Men are in a perilous situation. Old timers like to, they do their best to describe it. They'll say that it's as if being on a precipice. On a precipice. That you're anybody here afraid of heights? Oh, Richard is, I know. If you're on a precipice and you're on the very edge, you're not falling over. What helps you to fall over? Other than the wind.
Gravity.
Huh?
Gravity.
Oh, not that. No, you're not falling over because of that. Sister, you're up there on the edge of the building, the Empire State Building. You can't get back, and you go, oh. You just faint. No, over the edge you go. One missionary said it's like these guys. It's like going to you're on a bale of hay suspended with a spider web on a bale of hay that's soaked in gasoline. They would give these illustrations to try to scare people of where they're going to go. It's like you're going to hell on a bale of hay soaked in gasoline on a spider's web thread. And you'll have old timers talking about they're hanging on a spider's web, or they're on a precipice ready to fall off. But there is a great peril that these people are in, and that's what Romans is about, describing that. The sins of men, they go for the worst sin from the worst sins to all the other sins that they do in Romans chapter 1, and it's sins that you and I are involved in. Every last one of them. But the first and the last, why Paul wants to go there, and I hope tonight that you had something here. If there's anything we all need, and that is display the proof of salvation. Prove it. Prove it. All right? How do they do it in the Gunslinger and Shane? He says Stonewall Jackson, they're trash. He says all those rebels were trash. And he said something to him about you shouldn't be saying, yeah, they weren't trash. And then he says, prove it. And he guns him down. That's when Shane says to him back, or he says to Shane at the very end, prove it. You're just a Yankee liar. And he says, prove it. Prove it. We need to have proof we're saved, folks. Proof. By the witness of other people. Amen? And we need to water this seed down with prayer so that we would be prosperous. Perfecting the saints. Perfecting those in your household so that you may live in peace. Amen? And have a purpose in your life and pledge, I will solemnly swear we're going to do this out of duty. Amen? And preach with this power, with this ultimate plan, because people are in peril going to hell. Shake hands before leaving.